Welcome to America Stands. I'm Gene Bailey. So glad you're with us tonight. Tonight's Thursday, August 20th. Let me introduce who's on the panel tonight. Starting on my left, Greg Stevens. Glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
We have an eventful night. That's the word. Eventful night. And of course, Tim Fox. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And over in our newsroom, Mike Garofalo. Mike, I want to start with you. What do you think we're going to see tonight?
I think you're going to see a very focused Joe Biden. I understand he's going to be talking a lot about his biography, about his background, about his time in government, and maybe not be the attack dog that we've seen over the last couple nights from maybe Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama. He's really going to kind of stay focused, talk about himself, talk about what he wants to do, and try to not go negative. I think that's the gist of what we're going to see.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see that for sure. I want to, Greg, how about you? What do you think you're going to see tonight?
Well, obviously, everybody's watching to see if the gaps will happen that we've come to know and understand. But I think it's going to be more than that. He's going to have to appeal to the base because there has been a split in the party with Bernie Sanders and that group, AOC and all of those. He's going to have to appeal to them, but he's going to have to reach out to still the undecideds, those independent voters. He'll need to get them as well. So I pretty much agree with Mike. I think he's going to not be the attack dog. That's what he's going to use all the surrogates to do. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. All right, Tim, final wrap it up.
Well, I think what you will hear is what Mike was saying is probably a guy that's going to talk about his past. But they've spent a whole lot of time talking about all the things the president's done wrong, and nobody has said anything about what they're going to do to change it. So I think they need to come up with some plans on how they're going to do some things different.
I agree. So tonight, Joe Biden steps into a spotlight he has dreamed about his entire adult life, and has been actively pursuing it for at least 33 years. On his third try, after 8 years as second in command, he'll accept his party's nomination for president tonight. He's been building up to this moment for decades, and he's had endless amounts of time to think about the direction in which he wants to take the country. Finally, he alone gets to explain to the public why he deserves the presidency tonight and what he plans to do with it if he's elected. There are certainly presidential candidates who don't run on a well-formed agenda, and they usually don't win. For instance, Hillary Clinton had a filing cabinet of ideas, but her television ads were almost uniformly policy-free, focusing instead on Trump's character. Biden is headed down a very similar path, egged on by a Lincoln Project approach to politics. Now, I'm from Georgia, and I remember Jimmy Carter, and he reminds me of Jimmy Carter, who similarly tried to be everything to everyone during his campaign season. And when the details finally got hashed out, he became thoroughly unloved by his party, and in the primary, ousted and failed in re-election. And we all remember the 70s, especially when it came under the Carter regime. Absolutely. So I want you to know tonight we're going to go directly to the DNC. You'll hear elect Biden candidate, his total speech tonight, and then we'll come back here for explanation and commentary. We'll be watching right along with you, and I think we're going to see a very interesting night. Now, I did wonder if this was going to be a pre-taped, because what we've seen in nights 1, 2, and 3 has been very much scripted, pre-recorded, even to Michelle Obama never mentioning the vice president.
Well, that's because she recorded
it earlier.
Prior to. Yeah.
So, but we hear tonight that this will be live with Joe Biden, so it'll be interesting to see what he has to say.
Don't forget, when you're watching this tonight, that Joe Biden has been in Congress or in Washington, D.C., working for you for 40-something years? 50 years, his third attempt at the presidency. This is the speech he wanted to give in the 1980s. And I think that's very interesting to realize that all of these people that are the career politicians, none of this is their fault. It's all the fault of a guy who's been in there 3.5 years now.
But isn't that usually the way it works? Whoever's next in blames the last guy.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you don't have anything else.
Yeah, when you're struggling.
I want to see if he says anything about the polling places and mail-in ballot.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the first 3 nights. Yeah. Greg, tell us about what that.
It just seemed like an award show in many occasions to me. Kamala Harris did what I thought she would do. It was a historical moment. First woman of color to be nominated for her party's vice presidency. But it seemed the attack dogs, the different things, President Clinton, all the different ones. So it seemed kind of like, I felt like I was watching an award show when I was watching it. Nothing has stood out to me. I haven't had that moment where.
How about you, Mike Garofalo? Have you seen anything that you didn't see coming in this the first 3 nights of this convention?
Not really. I mean, the Democrats have really tried to make it as interesting as possible, and I think they've really fallen flat on that. And you're correct in terms of, for example, the Michelle Obama taped talk, not even mentioning Kamala Harris. I thought Kamala Harris did an okay job, but, you got to understand what happened while she was running for president. She didn't really gain much traction. So what does that mean? You had Bill Clinton limited to 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. Unusual. What does that say about the party? That says Bill Clinton is something of the past. He's not the future. And then Barack Obama, of course, doing everything he can to take his licks at Donald Trump. And he did the best he could. And I guess it's what we expected. But it's not what you usually see from a former president. However, things have changed.
Yeah, they surely have. Now, interestingly enough, tonight, Tim, I'm remembering in that first night, night one, when they got Cortez, AOC, and she put her votes in for
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. Now, that, as we all know, that was kind of brushed off.
They were.
But still, that's 30%.
Well, they are a party in turmoil, really, so to speak. And you talk about Barack Obama. All throughout the primary process, Barack Obama never endorsed Joe Biden until now, until he's the nominee. That should speak volumes, because Barack Obama is still wildly popular in the Democratic Party. And for him not to endorse Joe Biden until Joe Biden was actually the nominee, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, speaks volumes. Okay, so we also saw, we saw an attempt, Greg, with around the country showing blue-collar workers, everybody joining in, and we actually saw the Zoom, I call it the Zoom call video style of everybody clapping. But there was an interesting part where we saw, actually, they used some of the same pictures over and over in the same video. So obviously they were trying to present an image.
Well, these are the people that are probably delegates,
sure,
is what I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That they used in the Zoom calls for that purpose.
A way to get them involved because they weren't able to
and it's people you trust. You don't want somebody to all of a sudden hold up a sign, or something, eat pizza at my place, or you know what I mean? You want to control that.
Right.
And so I'm not surprised that it was some of the same people.
Yeah.
Well, we're waiting on Joe to take the platform there, and we'll cut to him as soon as we can. Final thoughts here, Mike, as we get ready to hear Joe Biden?
I think you're going to see a very measured Joe Biden, of course, a Joe Biden on teleprompter. So it's going to be very interesting. We know he's a gaffe-prone machine, as Greg said a short time ago. If you remember back to Dan Quayle, for example, the former vice president under George H.W. Bush, every time Dan Quayle made a gaffe, it was all over the news, all over the media. Well, Joe Biden does it. Is it all over? Nope. You barely hear a word about it. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out tonight. Yeah.
I really kind of, in some ways, Mike, I kind of feel bad for him because this is what he's wanted for decades. And here he gets to do it and nobody's in the room. It's going to be, the big convention with all the balloons and the pomp and the circumstance won't be there. I mean, where were they? In a library, I think. In a school earlier this week.
Yep.
In watching that. So I kind of in that way feel bad for him because this is the big moment and you're not going to have that. So I will be interested to see what they do to celebrate, in that.
Well, it's also the first time that he will be giving a live speech of this magnitude and this length ever in this process, and it may be the last time. Of course, they're supposed to have debates, but they're still questioning whether or not they're going to do that. And Mike, I'll throw it back to you in terms of the debates. I think if he doesn't do well tonight, I think they'll do everything they can to limit his debate prep. Would you say the same thing?
Oh, without question. I'm expecting them to try to pull a fast one where he's not even going to debate, or maybe not even being in the same room with Donald Trump. So we're going to see how that plays out. My buddy's running for U.S. Senate down in the state of New Mexico. He's the Republican nominee, and the Democrat, who has been a congressman for 6 terms, now he's running for Senate, has only agreed to one debate. He is afraid to go on the stage with him. So I'm expecting something similar here with Joe Biden.
I'm looking for one more thing. I want to see, because I'll tell you the elephant in the room. Pardon that. That's a Republican term. The thing I have seen, not a single mention that I can recall of any of the rioting or unrest that we've seen in the cities. I haven't seen any of that in this convention. Mike?
You're right. And that is so sad that these Democrat leaders aren't coming out there and saying, stop it, stop the violence, stop the brutality, stop beating up that guy we saw on the news the other day in the middle of the street. I mean, stop what you're doing. There's nobody coming out taking a leadership role and saying, calm down. It's almost like they're allowing it to go on because they know it's going to hurt the president. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what's happening right now. I think Donald Trump's going to be able to turn it around, but that's the direction it's been going, at least so far.
You know, Gene, you made a really good point in your monologue there, the fact that he's been waiting for this all his life. And it's a little unfortunate that in some ways, mentally, he's not really ready for it. I think we've seen that on the campaign trail. And so that part of it is a little bit sad. But I think, I'm really interested to see how he gets to this whole speech and if he's able to get through it without making too many of his gaffes and those kind of things.
So, Mike, I want to pitch it back to you. What is, for those that are scoring along at home, what's the process? We see tonight, kind of take us through what's going to happen in this whole election process. What's next?
Well, I think you're going to see a Kamala Harris, Joe Biden hitting the trail hard, probably together, at least in the beginning. It's going to be interesting to see, though, because Joe Biden has been in his basement and he has not been out there and he's not been talking to reporters. So really, we're in uncharted territory, Gene. So we really don't know where this is going to go. We do know this. We do know Donald Trump is going to get out there and do everything he can to hold as many rallies as he can. We know he's in Pennsylvania today, just down the street from where Joe Biden grew up. So the question is, how accessible is Joe Biden going to be to the media, and how it's going to play out? That's my interest.
Yeah, and so this time next week, we'll be back here, America Stands, and Mike will probably be covering a very different convention as we cover the Republican convention next week, and we'll be here to talk about that. I'm curious to see, Mike, I want to hear from you first as we're still waiting to hear Joe Biden come out. The news media, the fringe news media, the websites, the conspiracy theories, there's a common thread that we're starting to see emerge. Will Joe Biden actually make the final ticket on the election? What are you hearing out there? You think he'll drop out? Think something will happen?
I think he's going to do everything he can to make it to the finish line. That's a great question. I got to tell you, I was expecting Michael Bloomberg to hang tough because of this exact scenario, but he didn't. And he dropped out, right after Super Tuesday after spending a ton of money. Not sure why he did that, but he did it, and that's the case. But at this point, I think, Joe Biden is the horse, and they're just going to ride him to the finish line. And then Kamala Harris, they need to make sure that she can give a good speech, be solid, because obviously Joe Biden, the chances at the age of 77, is he going to make it for 4 years as president? We don't know. With his gaffes, is he solid mentally? We don't know. We're going to see how things play out on the campaign trail and go from there.
All right, so Tim, I want to ask you this. Yeah. What does Joe and the Democratic Party need to do tonight? What is it that they really need to accomplish? This is their last chance at this convention to the American public watching in a big way. What is it they need to do tonight?
Well, I think they probably need to contrast themselves from the president and talk about what they would do different. They've talked about how he's done everything wrong, but they've rarely come out and said what they will do different. I think the ironic thing about all of this is the fact that, Joe Biden is probably the reason they're going to ride him, as Mike said, is because he's way more electable than Harris. If Harris was on top of the ticket, I think it would be a totally different story. So they're going to ride him as far as they can. And I guess the thing is they're going to have ideas on how to, and as Greg said, they've all been in office for 40, 50 years and they haven't come up with any ideas yet. So
that's true. Well, and as we know, interesting fact is that if Joe Biden is elected, he will be older on his first day of office than
Ronald
Ronald Reagan was on his last day of office. So the whole age thing, if you remember, Mike, how much that came in the Reagan, I mean, the
with
news
Mondale.
media, and with Mondale, slammed about that, the age question.
Exactly. I'm not going to yet let my opponent's youth and inexperience, affect this race. Yeah. I mean, it was the best line ever. Walter Mondale sat there and laughed. But you're right, though. Joe Biden is older. And, I think, he's run 3 times, as you mentioned earlier. 88 had to drop out because of, some of the plagiarism that came through. So Joe Biden, if you look at his website, has a lot of ideas on there. And in the past, his ideas hasn't always been his own. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out moving forward. But he is old, and that is going to play a part in this race because Donald Trump has so much more energy.
Gene, the thing about this convention process is there's a couple of big things they do in this convention. Obviously, they bring their nominee and nominate their nominee for president. The other thing they do, and we'll talk about this a little bit tonight and going forward, is they ratify their party platform.
Right
and
here.
We're going to talk about that at some point tonight. And the difference in the two platforms are very stark.
What's the process for that, Tim? You're a delegate. So
it goes through the local level and the state level, and all the states come together and they talk about this party platform in these national conventions, and they have a committee. They put a committee together and they hash out all these different planks of the platform, and then normally they vote on it as a body there at the convention.
Yeah, we know somebody on that Republican.
We do. David Barton has been on the Republican Platform Committee in the last at least two cycles that I know of. Now, the Republicans have basically taken the 2016 platform and just rolled it over.
Okay, so once they get the platform in committee,
right?
What do we do? What's next?
Well, they talk about it and decide what planks they want in the platform, and they have to vote on that, and it comes back out to the floor, and then the whole convention will vote on that. They've done that virtually. They've already voted on their platform, so we pretty much know what it is and what it looks like. But the really interesting thing is you got the AOCs and those parts of the party. They're not totally happy with the platform as it is, but make no mistake, those folks are somewhat running the party right now.
Yeah, Mike, I want to pitch a little bit of news while we're still, it looks like the Democratic convention is a little bit behind where they thought they'd be right now. A lot in the news happening there seems to be a real polarization of private companies who are whether they want to or not, they've been called out on where they stand. I'm thinking of most recently Goodyear in their news story, which they probably are regretting to some point, yet they have not withdrawn it. Can you kind of bring everybody up to speed on that?
Well, the bottom line is I think the Black Lives Matter and these movements have been going to the corporations, basically saying, we want your support, we need your support. And with the way everything has moved since the death of George Floyd, which was horrific, obviously, in Minnesota, there's an opportunity here for these companies or for people to go to these companies and say, we would like a donation, we would like a donation, we would like a donation, we want your support. And in many cases, these companies give it, whether they want to or not, and in many cases they just give it, okay, fine. But once you understand what some of these groups are after and what they believe in and what they want down the road, you kind of look twice and you say, wait a minute, do you realize what you're supporting right now? So that's the instance with Goodyear, for example. And President Trump came out and called them out.
Yeah, he absolutely did.
Describing extortion.
Yeah, it really is. It's like paying the mob to keep your store open. All right, so Greg, let's start with the platform since we have a few minutes. We'll start going down the differences. So why don't you take the top one there?
The very first one here, the sanctity of human life. The Democratic platform that they have passed now calls for government-funded abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy by repealing the Hyde Amendment, which bars federal money for elective abortion. They will overturn the federal and state laws and policies that impede a woman's access to abortion. And we will continue to stand up to the Republican efforts to defund Planned Parenthood. That's right there on the Democratic platform. Tim, it's just the opposite for the Republicans.
Well, it absolutely is. The Republicans are proud to be the party that protects human life and offers real solutions for women and strongly opposes infanticide. Supports the following: the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which we've talked about on this program many, many times. They've not been able to get that passed yet. A human life constitutional amendment, a ban on abortion at 20 weeks. You see all the different things there on the screen. You know, to me, here's the interesting thing, Gene and Greg, is you've heard already this week Bernie Sanders say this, you heard Obama say this, that our democracy is at stake. Well, first of all, we're not a democracy. We're a democratic republic, a constitutional republic. And our Constitution, it's interesting, says the pursuit of life, which the Democrats are against, liberty, which the Democrats are against, and the pursuit of happiness. So you look through this platform and you see it, a lot of it goes directly against the Constitution.
So I'll read real quickly. We're getting closer to the vice president. Here's the Democratic platform this year concerning religious liberty. I know that's very important to many of you as believers. I'll read it exactly. Claims LGBT rights trump religious freedom and rejects the misuse of religion to discriminate such. Will provide faith-based organizations, will punish faith-based organizations that contract with the government and pull the tax-exempt status of religious universities without transgender bathrooms and showers through imposing federal non-discriminatory protections for all LGBT Americans on the basis of gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity.
See if this doesn't sound on the Republican side like something that we're dealing with today. Strongly supports the freedom of Americans to act in accordance with their religious beliefs, not only in their houses of worship, but also in their everyday lives. We value the right of Americans' religious liberties to preach to Americans speak freely according to their faith. Republicans believe the federal government, specifically the IRS, is constitutionally prohibited from policing or censoring speech based on religious convictions or beliefs.
Now, it's interesting. I want to stop right here.
Yeah.
The LGBT agenda, there's a phrase in there that you said that was a little vague about gender identity.
Gender identity. Gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity.
Mm-hmm. And it also leaves room for, shockingly, leaves room in an upcoming news story that we're seeing so much more about pedophiles.
Yeah.
That is not an aversion. That is normal.
There's an argument for something called the Equality Act.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit later. I do want to update you on a story that just came to me. Since we talked about Goodyear, I want to give you some good news about Goodyear. They caved to President Trump, according to the GatewayPundit.com, and they've reversed their ban on Blue Lives Matter. So if you work at Goodyear now, you can wear pro-police, pro-law enforcement.
Yeah. Interesting how that headline reads.
Yes.
That's really all you need to know about the way our media operates today, reading that headline.
Yeah, Goodyear caves to President Trump.
Right. Yeah.
So there we are. Well, good for you, Goodyear. Glad to see you making some change in what's going on. All right, so let's talk about...
The next NASCAR race wasn't going to be pretty for them.
It was not going to be good at all. NASCAR, for sure, would have had problems. You know, Mike, I want to ask you, you've been through a few elections before. What is the most glaring difference in this one for you when you've covered elections?
The fact that Joe Biden has been inaccessible to the media, and the fact that if you do research on the number of stories that are out there that are negative toward President Trump and negative or even involve Joe Biden, you would be blown away by the numbers. It's ridiculous. And that's the story that we're not hearing a lot about. The reason we're not hearing about it is because the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it because it's what they're doing.
That's why we're here. That's why America Stands is here, Victory Channel, Kenneth Copeland Ministries, we're all here to give you coverage in the spirit of faith. I think it's interesting how someone can hide out in their basement and actually gain numbers.
It's very telling how he has not been accessible to a media that would be very friendly to him.
Oh, yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
He's not been accessible, has not come out and spoken to a media that was very friendly to the administration he was in for 8 years,
Tim,
and would be very friendly to him as well.
Now, mine was only a state race. It was not a federal race or even a national race. When I ran for state senate in California, my chief opponent never showed up to a single forum, single debate, nothing. he would send one of his surrogates out, but he never showed up to anything. And
what's the benefit of doing it that way?
He didn't have to answer for some of the sanctions that were placed on him. He never had to deal with the questions that we were dealing with, and he never showed up. And we started making a joke about it, putting a chair there and all. And but here's the deal: he won. So there is a strategy that can work by following that. You're minimizing your weakest point of failure.
Yeah,
we're getting word that Joe Biden is not ready yet, so he's taking a little bit more time, so we've got a few more minutes. Let's pick up on the differences in the party platform comparison. I want to talk about God and government. Greg?
Well, it's real quick. I've been reading the Democratic platform here, and God and government, and there's one sentence that says, as Democrats, they are silent on the role of God in government. Tim?
Yeah, and if you were watching Victory Update today and you saw the news break, in fact, I may go back to Mike on this. Mike even talked about the fact in this news break today that there were two different caucuses within the convention this week that they always say the Pledge of Allegiance. Every Republican meeting I've ever gone to, we say the Pledge of Allegiance and we say the pledge to the Texas flag. They did the Pledge of Allegiance, and both of these caucuses left out the words "under God," and they did it on purpose, right, Mike? I mean, it wasn't a mistake.
It clearly was done on purpose. No comment yet from the Democratic National Committee as to whether that was going to be the policy going forward, but it happened. Nobody made a big deal about it. It had to be called out by some conservative news like us, CBN News, Washington Times. But beyond that, you didn't hear anything about it, did you?
Yeah, no, you didn't. And here's what the Republican platform says about God and government. If God-given natural, inalienable rights come in conflict with government, court, or human-granted rights, God-given, natural, inalienable rights always prevail. We support the public display of the Ten Commandments as a reflection of our history and our country's Judeo-Christian heritage. We'll fight for school choice and local control. And that's another one. School choice is something, a lot of people because of COVID, have now gone to homeschooling, and a lot of private schools. Some private schools have seen an increase in enrollment, and so that's a good, but
a significant bump.
It's a significant bump, yeah. But right now, their tax dollars can't go to where they're educating their kids. Their tax dollars are still going to these public schools where they're not sending their kids because of those very reasons.
And you've heard the president say that in a second term, that's what he wants to change, that the money follows the student.
That's it. And that's significant. That really is, especially for people that are watching this program. You want to put your kids in a private school.
You could.
You couldn't. You could, and your money would follow you if the president has his way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what role, and I'll start with Mike, we'll go around the room here. What role does this COVID-19 virus that, started in February, what role do you think that has played specifically in this election process?
A huge role. And let me tell you why. Because the economy was zooming along. We had record low unemployment for many different factions of our society. We had growth. The markets were just on fire. And then COVID hit. It put the brakes on so much of what we were doing, and just kind of. And then, so the bottom line is, this really has changed the election. And the only reason this is an election, the only reason Donald Trump, in my opinion, has a chance of possibly losing, is because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Greg, what do you think?
Two things. There's a lot of talk right now about mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
All right. Here's what they don't want you to think. We just are supposed to comply. Mail-in ballots, I see two things. We learned something during COVID. Here's what we've learned, that Walmart, Costco, Target, the big stores are safe places. So my question is, let's put ballot boxes at those stores. We've already proven it's safe to go there, so let's vote at Walmart. Okay, we invented something called drive-through COVID testing. You remember that? You drive your car into a tent, you stay in your car, they swab you, and you are tested for COVID. Let's do drive-in voting.
Yeah.
We've proven that we can do that.
Yeah.
Here's the constitutional issue. If the states can't get a certified election, in other words, we don't have all the mail-in ballots back, here's what happens. The Constitution kicks in. If by Inauguration Day, there's no certified election Donald Trump or Biden haven't won, then the Constitution says there's an interim president. The interim president would be the Speaker of the House. And right now, that would be Nancy Pelosi. She would become the President of the United States in an interim. So all the forces have been using this COVID thing. Yeah. And it's provided cover for Joe Biden. Yeah. It's something to think about when you think about the mail-in election. Yeah. This has always been, Gene, about comply, not the science. The science doesn't even back it.
And I'll pick up on what Mike was talking about in terms of the economy. We have said on this program many times over the years on America Stands that if you are right on the life issue, then you'll get it right in about 99% of the other issues. Mike said the economy was going really well before this hit. And of course, it took a huge hit. But as you may or may not know, the economy has been slowly recovering. It's been coming back. And I think that's because this president is right on the life issue. He is one of the most pro-life presidents that we've had in maybe some of our lifetimes, maybe not all of our lifetimes. And also, the other thing that he has been right on is Israel. Our relationship with Israel is key to the success and the blessing of this nation. And he, by moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which many presidents before him had the opportunity to do, and many said they were going to do, never did. But he did it, Gene, and I personally believe that because he's right on life and that he's right on Israel, that the economy is coming back, and it will continue to do so if he's reelected.
Yeah, amen. I agree with that. Let's talk about some spiritual reasons right now. Cory Booker is right now talking at the convention. We'll get to them just very quickly here as soon as we see Joe Biden take the platform. Greg, scripturally, as a believer, what should I do? How should I stand in this?
Well, I think Brother Copeland said it better than anybody. Your vote is your seed.
Yeah.
You have one vote, and that is your seed in this election. And you are required to be a good steward of it and to do something with it. Separation of church and state. Listen, according to the New Testament, I am the church. I'm the temple of the Holy Spirit, and I live in this state. Yeah. You can't separate me from that. Yeah. And over and over and over, I could do scripture after scripture after scripture. And this is why I think the restrictions on churches to try to get them to shut up and not meet. Yeah. Because largely, I truly believe this, that the evangelical vote for Donald Trump 4 years ago is what put him over.
No doubt. No doubt. And here's the thing. I heard this the other day, and I can't make it any better. So if you won the lottery, would you mail your ticket in, or would you go down there and redeem it? You have to treat your vote like the lottery. Because it really is. You would never mail that lottery ticket in. You'd go down there and get that money. Right. You'd go down there because that's how valuable it is. Your vote should be that valuable to you. And this mailing voting thing, and we'll get into that at some point, I would say there's no way. As Greg said, there's other ways to do it. We could vote in person in other ways. I mean, if we can go to Walmart and shop, why can't we go somewhere and vote in person? So this mail-in voting thing, which will be a big issue, has already been a big issue, and it will be a campaign issue, I promise you, is something that we ought to say, no way, no how.
Yeah, Mike, I want to ask you before we pick up here again in the next topic. As we're seeing all of this, the issues with versus Republican versus Democrat, Joe Biden versus President Trump, what we're hearing from the Christian world, the conservatives, is really a move. It's kind of, they've pushed it just a little too far, and now we're starting to see churches stand up slowly, but they're standing up to their rights. Is that what you're seeing in the news?
Oh, without question, especially in Greg's state of California, one-time state of California. You're seeing pastors doing what they need to do, and they're running into situations where they're going to be in contempt of court. But they're saying this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to have a worship service. We cannot just walk away from church, walk away from God. We've got to keep people in church and let them pray, let them worship, and let them do what they need to do, because that's the way it's supposed to be, not pull people out of the pulpit.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
On that, my church in California was a polling place. Our fellowship hall at one side of our building, not in the auditorium, we couldn't do it there, but that was a polling place. So now if my church is shut down, there's no polling place for my entire neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Obviously, that's a problem. But real quickly, I did a story a couple days ago about, and let me know, Gene, if you got to go and toss it to Joe Biden. But Michigan, there were so many signatures that were invalid, and when the Secretary of State got those ballots, I mean, hundreds, if not more than that, maybe a couple thousand, I don't know. And then there were some from deceased people, and then there were people that had moved, after they had requested their ballot. So it's just crazy how many problems there can be with mail-in ballots, and we really need to take a close look at that. One other thing to mention real quickly, how long it took the state of New York to count their ballots. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And we're going to long for the days of the dangling Chad.
Is that the truth?
With the way things are. But we're standing in faith.
There's a whole generation right now
that has no idea.
That can vote.
Yeah.
That don't know what that is. That was 2000, right?
Yeah, it was 2000.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow, 20 years.
Yes, 20 years, yeah.
And those kids can vote now. They don't know what happened with dangling Chad.
Yeah.
So, Google it. Okay. So, you talked about as you were a pastor, Greg, and all that. And Tim, you've been in ministry here for seems like your whole life.
Pretty much.
Yeah, your whole adult life.
Right.
I've never seen the degree of the conservative Christians rally like this. And I'm sure David Barton, who'll be on this program in the future, has some interesting insight into this. There's a rallying cry that's coming out like never before. I'm thinking of Sean Foyt from Bethel out in California, encircling the country, setting these pop-up praise, even in Portland, Los Angeles, and other places. We're seeing some things really happen here, and it's time. It really has come to this place where it's time to stand up and be counted for what's really right, what you stand for, and if that means you go to jail, you go to jail.
Yeah.
When I was studying in Bible school, and I used to never be able to figure out how will the Antichrist be able to take over? How long will it take him to get this thing? And I now know the answer. About 30 days.
Wow.
About 30 days. Because we saw America completely in 30 days.
That's right.
And unless the church does something.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important that these churches in California and other states have started to stand up and say, no more.
Tim, I have pastor friends that I pray for them every Sunday because they literally risked being cited or jailed every single Sunday morning.
Right.
But now, Greg, this goes back a long ways. Let's talk about the black robe regiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of re-educate everyone on what really, by the way, Joe Biden has delayed again. We're still going to carry it as soon as he comes out, but he has delayed.
And what's happening, in case you want to know what's been going on with him, they're playing videos of all the people that ran against Joe that are endorsing him. So Mayor Bloomberg is speaking now and different ones. So that's what it's been. There are 20 some odd people in that primary. So it may be a while before we get there. Black robe. During the war and the revolution, during the fighting, King George III referred to and actually put a hit out for his troops to take out the preachers. The preachers wore black robes primarily in their pulpits. And I'm going to use the word that King George used. He called them the damnable black robes because the furor and the rallying cry and the meeting place for the militias was in the churches. And one of them, the two Muhlenberg brothers, one from New York and one from Virginia, one of them became the Speaker of the House later. You can go to the Hall of Archives right now and see where he signed the Bill of Rights. That was a pastor that did that. Paul Revere on his ride and all of that kind of stuff stayed with a pastor. The pastors were the ones that led. They're the ones that inspired the people. Matter of fact, this phrase, you've heard it before. Now, Joe Biden messed this phrase up. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, by certain unalienable rights, right? The whole Declaration of Independence. Yeah. That was written by a pastor in Ipswich, Massachusetts. And Jefferson liked it so much, he changed the wording of it, but he took the pastor's words and put it in our Declaration of Independence. So the black robes are the guys who would preach on Sunday morning and take that robe off, grab their musket, and go to battle and Sunday afternoon. Matter of fact, the hymnal of the day was called the Watts Hymnal, Watts, Watts. And one of the rallying cry, they took pages out of the hymnal for wadding.
Yeah.
For their muskets. And they would say, give them Watts, boys, give them Watts.
Yeah.
And so it was pastors.
Isn't that amazing?
That led. It was pastors that led.
I remember the first time I went to the Capitol building and saw Muhlenberg's statue and
Yeah.
started to see all the religious leaders from our nation's history. It was astounding. Mm-hmm. It was astounding for two reasons. One, I didn't know it. And second, I thought, wait a minute. As old as I am, I still never saw that in school. We didn't, even back in the 60s, they didn't talk about it.
So here's the interesting thing about the Muhlenbergs. There were two of them, Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg and Peter Muhlenberg. And one of the brothers, the one from New York, was upset at his younger brother from Virginia, who was all fired up to go to battle, and said, you need to stop this. This is not what the church should do, until the British burned his church down. And the next thing you know, he was on board.
All right, let's pick up with the Supreme Court, the differences, the Republican and Democrat. Listen, if you want to know what we're reading from, this is from the Family Research Council. You can Google that. It's just frcaction.org.
Tony Perkins and his folks, they do a great job.
So, Tim, explain the Supreme Court right and left.
Well, here, let me read the Democratic side. I'll give you the Republicans on this one, okay? The Democrats, for the Supreme Court, we will appoint judges to protect a woman's right to abortion and a progressive agenda of equality for all in which LGBT rights trump religious liberty. That's the kind of judges that they want on the Supreme Court.
So the Republican platform says this: we support the appointment of judges who respect the traditional family values and the sanctity of innocent human life. We seek to enable the courts to begin to reverse the long line of activist decision, including Roe, Obergefell, and the Obamacare cases.
You know, Mike, we hear a lot about judges and court packing. In fact, the Democrats have talked about packing the court with their kinds of judges. The thing is, the president has appointed somewhere around 200 judges in his nearly 4 years, which is actually the second most in a 4-year term of any president. So this one issue right here is really one of the most important in my estimation, because the next president will probably appoint one, maybe two more Supreme Court judges, but he'll also have a whole more slew of federal judges. Don't you agree?
Without question. This is a huge election, especially when it comes to the judiciary. And yes, the Supreme Court, no doubt about it. The next 2 or 3 slots that open up, you're going to want a Republican president in there. And they're saying this election is the most important election dating back to 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was elected. And in many ways it is, because the sanctity of human life is at risk here. And we've got to get the Republicans have to get the turnout. That's the bottom line. I mean, because if Joe Biden gets elected, who knows who's going to be pulling the strings behind him? We know at one point he was a moderate, but I don't even know what he is anymore.
I'm not sure he does.
So here's what Obama did, though. In those 8 years, he didn't put a lot of judges on.
Right.
But what he did is he politicized the Department of Justice. He politicized the IRS. He put people in key positions that are unelected. They're the bureaucrats. And the bureaucrats are the ones that have done all the regulations, my friend, for all of the COVID stuff.
Yeah. In fact, when Obama, when he left office, really thought he was leaving the job to Hillary.
He did. And he did. He thought that Hillary would be able to appoint all of these judges and just sort of continue his legacy, so to speak. And thank God, by God's grace, it did not happen. And there are a lot of really good judges on the court now. And we had Kelly Shackelford on Liberty Line recently, and we saw him, Brother Copeland played some clips from him recently that talked about so many good judges, so many good godly judges. And the reason that's important is because they don't rewrite the law. They interpret the law. They're not rewriting the law, and that's a big difference.
That's right. In fact, many of you are wondering probably, what does the Bible say about government? I want you to watch this real quick clip, and we'll be right back.
God established 3 institutions: family, government, and the church. The role of the government is to uphold justice and give no partiality. It was never instructed to provide for the poor. That is the role of the church and families. When we vote for policies that enable the government to carry out functions it was never created to do, they will not be successful, nor will they be efficient. For example, Today, less than 30% of taxpayer money goes to the intended target. God tells the church and individuals that the one who blesses others is blessed. It does not say that the distribution of taxes will make you blessed. It is because the church is not involved in communities that we are not effective today. As Christians, we need to get involved in our communities and vote according to the way God established government. And that intent was to defend and protect the rights of the people.
An original intent. That's what we've been talking about a lot. But there's also, you know what's interesting? It's been a while, but if we remember the pilgrimage heading to the border of hundreds, if not thousands, of refugees, that just sort of went away.
It did go away.
Yeah.
It did go away. Why did that go away? You know what? There's probably a good reason for that, right? I mean,
you know, borders is a big deal. Borders is about protecting our nation's border. President Trump's vowed to build a wall. He's already done some of that already in his presidency, and we see a lot more happening. But what does the Bible say about your borders? Watch this.
God established nations and gave them borders. If having borders is biblical, then why do people still argue for open borders? One of the primary purposes of government is to protect the people. It is not about keeping people out who have need, but about protecting what God has entrusted to the government. In the Bible, anyone could live among the Israelites as long as they followed their laws and customs. In America, assimilation is needed for all immigrants. God says that the same law shall apply to the citizen as to the immigrant. With open borders, we would not be able to monitor who enters and leaves the country. Immigration requires assimilation, and it must be done legally. Jesus did not try to abolish the law, but he came to fulfill it. As Christians, we need to vote in accordance with the Word of God regarding immigration.
Amen. Yeah. Open borders, and it's a good thing to have borders. Fences make good neighbors, right? Isn't that the old story? Well, what's going on? You're wondering, why have we not seen Joe Biden? Well, right now, what you're seeing is the kids and the grandkids. They're all talking about dad and granddad right before he speaks.
Hunter Biden is going to speak in a little while, and I know we've covered some issues. There's been a lot of things about him in the news as well. So I was kind of surprised that he'll be on tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what do you think about that, Mike? Hunter Biden, with all the issues he's had and the millions he's made, is he a good or a bad thing for Joe Biden?
I think in the big picture, I think he's a bad thing for you because as long as people are going to dig into Hunter Biden and want to learn more about his background, they're going to be very disappointed as to what they see. But I see Joe Biden, and he says, well, he's my son. He's my only surviving son. I'm going to put him out there. I'm going to let him speak. So from that standpoint, I get it. But big picture wise and his background and what he's done and the bad press he's brought to the family, I wouldn't want him out there.
Yeah. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I think think about the fact that if President Trump had someone in his family that had the baggage that Hunter Biden had.
Well, like Russia, Ukraine, China.
Yeah.
It's made millions of
Think
millions
about
of
the fodder that would be for the national news media. And, of course, we don't hear a lot about it. So
he'll be on in a moment. We're doing the grandkids still now, and his children will be on shortly. And then the Vice President Biden will take the stage for his long-awaited acceptance speech, and we'll catch it. You'll see it all right here.
I want to talk about one more piece of this before I think we got time to cover one more. Let's talk about terrorism. Where is the difference in the party platforms on terrorism? Tim, why don't you explain that for us?
Democrats say that they believe in defeating terrorism and combating climate change. How climate change has anything to do with terrorism, I do not know, but there it is. It's in their platform.
Well, this is a little longer for the Republican side. It says radical Islamic terrorism poses an existential threat to personal freedom and peace around the world. We oppose its brutal assault on all human beings, all of whom have inherent dignity. Now, I'm going to say the Republicans missed it on this because I believe we have domestic terrorism happening right now. Yeah. In cities that all across America. We see it every single night.
Yeah.
And what role do you think, Mike, let me hand this back over to you. What role do you think everything from Chicago to Portland and all the issues with the fires and the riots and the destruction of property, what role do you think that's going to have in this election process?
Well, it should have a huge role in this election process. Unfortunately, because of the coverage or lack thereof of the media, I don't think it is, at least not so far. But for the average American that's sitting home and watching their TV at night, and let's say they come across something that's happening in Portland, Seattle, and other places, they got to be like, what is going on? Meanwhile, I believe the Democrats want it to continue, and they don't take a leadership role in trying to stop it because they think it's going to hurt the president. And that is so sad to see what's happening to this country, the statues, the monuments, things like that. You've got to wonder what is going on in this world right now because, I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you'd heard about this, you'd be like, that's crazy.
Well, no, I tell you, Mike, we did hear about this. I'm old enough, the hair color, I'm old enough to remember 1968. I was a kid, but I remember it. There were riots. And things happening on college campuses and in cities. But the mayors of those cities, and many of them were still Democrat of those cities, they shut it down. They didn't sit by and watch this. The Democratic Party has changed from what I remember as a child.
You know, Mike, you have been in media for a long time. You've worked at news stations. You've been around this thing for a long time. You know, we talk about media integrity, media bias. There really is a media bias, is there not?
Oh, without question. And I think you can read some books, recent books on it. But I was watching the news the other day, watching a network. I'm not going to name who it was. And I sat there and I said, wait a minute. Are they for real? I mean, it was a major network newscast, and I never would have ever thought they were down the middle. I mean, they were as far left as they could go. It was almost at the point of being ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's why, Gene, what we do here is so important. We've talked about it so many times, and people have come up to all of us and said, thank you guys for doing this, because we don't hear this anywhere else.
Yeah, we want to make sure you do remember, stay tuned to us all the next, how many days is it, 76?
Yeah.
Somewhere
74.
in there. 74 days until the election, and of course on election night, we have many special guests that'll be here. You want to make sure you tune to the Victory Channel.
November 3rd.
We'll all be here November 3rd to cover the election. And if I remember correctly, in 2016, we were one of the first to call that for President Trump. And I remember after we called it going, oh, Jesus, I hope that was right.
We were saying that's David calling that. David Martin, he's the one calling it. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Greg, as we pray, I want you to pray right now. Let's take some time before we hear from Joe Biden, and really let's pray for the man, his family, and what he's under right now. He's under a lot.
Yeah, we were commanded in Scripture to pray for our leaders.
That's right.
And those that are in leadership over us. And this man wants to be the President of the United States. So, Father, I thank you now that his words, what he truly believes, what he truly wants, will be articulated to the American people. I pray for fairness, Father. I pray for justice. I pray for a unity in America that seems like it's not existent, but that's our name, the United States of America. I pray for unity in this great land again, Father. I pray that the Christians will pay attention and have their eyes and their ears open. And here's what you taught us to pray in your word, Ephesians chapter 1, Ephesians chapter 3, that the eyes of your understanding be enlightened by the word, that you may see and know. And Father, that's what I'm asking, for a spirit of seeing and knowing truth, and see where you are directing and see what you are doing, and that we'll cooperate with what you're doing in Jesus' name. Amen.
I agree with that. Set my faith in agreement with it in Jesus' name. Amen. Listen, I want to tell you about our website, America Stands. You can go to our website. There's videos there. We'll be uploading the new what we're covering tonight. We'll be uploading that. Pastor George will be giving us the breakdown of everything. Again, it's just govictory.com/America Stands, and you can find out all the latest. I want to encourage you, if you haven't registered to vote, it's not too late.
It's not too late, and you can do it right there on that website. There are a lot of states where you can actually do it online. It's real easy to do that. But go to America Stands website, govictory.com/America Stands. It's still on the screen there for you. And there's about a third of the way down. You can click on that. Here's the thing I want to challenge you all to do. We talk about registering to vote, and a lot of you may already be registered to vote, and good for you. But we have to share this. We have to get it out there. We have to get other people registered. As Greg has already mentioned, the evangelical vote is very powerful. When we coalesce and come together, we are very powerful. But the problem is we haven't always come together, and that means some of us haven't registered to vote. Do voter drives. We do that here at our church. Go get voter registration cards and pass them out in church. That's certainly legal, and it's something we encourage you to do. So
that's right.
Get involved.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because, there is such a divisive spirit, Greg, that we're seeing. It starts with the mask. Do you wear a mask or not wear a mask? And, there's such a tumultuous environment.
And then what kind of mask?
What kind of mask? Oh, well, that's not a good mask. And so it's a crazy world that we're seeing out there right now that comes to your liberties. And you got to understand the spiritual forces behind this are to tear down, not to build you up. It's to tear down.
Spirit of confusion.
The spirit of confusion. And we know where confusion is, every evil work.
Yep.
So, and we don't want to give in to the strife and confusion. So this is where it's going to take us as believers to recommit every aspect of your life. Man, I am praying more.
Really.
And some days I just really don't know how to pray. And that's when, Greg, it's praying in the Spirit so that we know exactly.
When you don't know how to pray, that's
when
how
you don't know how to pray, you pray in the Spirit. So I want to encourage everyone in our audience to pick that up. Don't get so hooked on the news. Listen, there have been nights I've had to get up, I had to turn the news off and go walk around, just because I just get mad and get upset. But that's not that's not the best way to live, okay? It's not the best way to live. You should be informed, but you don't have to be catered to what the news media is handing you, unless it's on the Victory Channel. So,
and we've got the best. We got
we
Mike.
do have the best.
We got Mike.
That's right.
Mike, when you were an anchor, when you were doing this, were you ever the news director or producers ever directed to that's too conservative or ask you to change a story?
Believe it or not, the answer to that is no, never once. But the only thing I was ever asked to do, actually, was, believe it or not, it had to do with advertising dollars. And if X amount of company wasn't spending with us, I don't want them talked about in a story. So it was the dollar. It wasn't a political thing.
And you bring up a good point there, Mike. The secular media, and I'm talking about every other media outlet, whether they're news or not, it's all about advertising. Yeah. And I think I'm surprised at how many people actually don't understand that. Oh, people just want to make movies. No, they want to make money. Yeah. So they're advertisers. There's what drives so much of this.
And they also feel like people are trusting. They feel like there's no way these people are lying to me. There's no way these people are deceiving me in the news. And I think for far too long, people have believed that what they hear in the news media, it must be true because the news media is trustworthy. But unfortunately, as Mike has said, and we've all said here, they're not so much anymore.
Right. I remember it's like growing up is don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. Now people don't even read newspapers anymore. It's don't believe everything you read on the internet. And what we're seeing, there's only one thing that's true and that we know that you can depend on, and that's the Word of God. You've got to stay connected and pray. There's a reason. When I pray and I stop watching news,
pray the Word.
I pray the Word, instantly peace comes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even when you prayed tonight, there was a peace that kind of settled back in here.
So they're doing a video now about Joe Biden, and in a moment he'll take the stage, and you won't miss a single bit of that. We're waiting for that to happen. It should be any time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's talk about some upcoming guests, because I have nothing else to talk about. So, as if you probably didn't know that, we plan to talk for about 10 minutes. And we're 40 minutes into this, or an hour almost into this.
Well, that's good. I got a couple of preachers with me, so we're good.
Yeah, you notice I turned it to the Word there. We got stuff to talk about. I just want to say that we have so much happening in our world with news that I want to explain something to you. You're going to see in the next few weeks right here on the Victory Channel more news-related programming, not just election coverage and more. We're in the hot part of the season now with the election and what's going on in politics, and we're going to cover that in a much more in-depth way. Some of the guests we've got lined up.
So can I ask you, Gene, because you're the point of the spear on this,
pretty much
for this network.
Yeah.
We've added some things. We've increased. We've grown. Besides having DirecTV on now, welcome DirecTV, we've added some resources to our election coverage. Could you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, we've added part of this. I know Mike will remember this. We have added the Associated Press, and we are the first. We're on tier 1. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but we're on the top tier. We will have the latest possible results. There's no one that's going to beat us to results on election night because
it's not just
done that.
Us three guys and Mike, who has news experience, talking about
and
stuff.
The internet.
We literally have AP credentials now.
Yeah, we do. We are a site we can download and be able to bring it to you. And I will say this: we are. This is all because of our commitment of brother and sister Copeland and Pastor George and Terry Pearson's being committed to bring you the news. Brother Copeland said to me the other day, "Gene, we need to do more. We got to do more. You know."
If there would have been a conference, a convention, Democratic convention as normal, we would have been there.
Yeah, Mike and I would have been there.
Well, we already had credentials to be able to follow that, but we were obviously not able to do that. And same thing with the Republican convention. Nevertheless, we will cover it in detail, and you'll have commentary from people such as David Barton, Tim Barton, Michelle Bachmann, who was going to join us tonight, had a change at the last minute. Michelle Bachmann and some other people I just can't say yet. That you'll be really surprised, and it's going to be a great time.
It's a whole nother level.
It's interesting to see, Tim, when we first started this in 2012, up there in the church. We should probably pull out a piece of that video, guys, and show that sometime. Show how we were crammed in a little piece of the stage.
My very first night with you guys. I don't know if you remember this or not. I was standing there, Pastor Terry. I had just said something, and Pastor Terry was talking. And as I was sitting there, Mike, you've probably never had these kind of things happen live on the air. I was sitting there, and my chair began to. You remember that?
I do.
It began to go down live, and you guys were all laughing.
We were laughing.
And so we've come a long ways.
Yeah, that was, I believe, 2014, leading into 2016.
My first year.
Yeah. So we had a lot. Well, we're in the last video, I'm being told. You can show them, guys, kind of what's going on there in the screen. This is nostalgic pictures of Joe Biden, his life, his family. So much happening there.
And the candidates do this to give it a human. A human approach, a human touch about who this person is that we're about to hear.
Yeah.
And so you can put, that feel-good moment with what they're saying.
And I think it bears mentioning here, we're not against a person. I mean, he's probably a good man. We're told he's a good man. What we're here to talk about is the fact that he's not the guy to lead this country. He's not the guy, because of the party that he is affiliated with, he's not the guy to lead he's a great guy, but he's just not the guy to lead the country.
Well, and it's not a popularity contest.
No.
And I know
you guys have all said, I've heard people say before, you guys are all Republicans. No, we're not.
No.
They may be. I'm not. I once was. I ran as a Republican, but I'm not now.
Are you American?
Mike, help me out. Help me out there.
Mike, I do want to ask you, as we're in the last few seconds, real quickly, he's going to talk about the Equality Act. Real quick, give me a quick blurb on what that really is all about.
All right, let me tell you real quick. I got it in front of me. The Equality Act is a bill that would add sexual orientation and gender identity as protected classes under federal civil rights law. And so that's the basic gist of it. It is a big deal. We need to really understand what this means, who it impacts, how it could affect your family, how it could affect your kids. We're going to be talking a lot about this going forward, Gene, and there's a big reason for that.
Yeah, so you want to make sure you need to do some of your own research. The internet can be a wonderful thing.
Five main groups that are points. Here's the deal. I haven't read all of it. I saw part of it. That men could have an abortion.
I'm not sure how that can happen.
It's part of it.
Also, keep in mind, you're going to hear things like equality, the Equality Act. You'll hear things like
that's great.
We want fairness. You'll hear words like fairness, and those all sound good until you kind of peel it back and look deeper into it, which is what we're going to try to help you do. But maybe you should do a little bit on your own as well, because they play to your emotions. The Democratic Party will play to the emotions, and you should never make a decision on emotions.
Yeah, you never should. I've tried to tell you that for years now.
I know. I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
Okay, so we're down to the final countdown. Here
we
is
go.
Joe Biden. Will be back right after his speech.
Ella Baker, a giant of the civil rights movement, left us with this wisdom: give people light, and they will find the way. Give people light. Those are words for our time. The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America. We'll choose hope over fear, facts over fiction, fairness over privilege. I'm a proud Democrat, and I'll be proud to carry the banner of our party into the general election. So it's with great honor and humility I accept this nomination for President of the United States of America. But while I'll be a Democratic candidate, I will be an American president. I'll work hard for those who didn't support me, as hard for them as I did for those who did vote for me. That's the job of a president, to represent all of us, not just our base or our party. This is not a partisan moment. This must be an American moment. It's a moment that calls for hope and light and love, hope for our future, light to see our way forward, and love for one another. America isn't just a collection of clashing interests of red states or blue states. We're so much bigger than that. We're so much better than that. You know, nearly a century ago, Franklin Roosevelt pledged a New Deal in a time of massive unemployment, uncertainty, and fear. Stricken by a disease, stricken by a virus, FDR insisted that he would recover and prevail, and he believed America could as well. And he did, and we can as well. This campaign isn't just about winning votes. It's about winning the heart and, yes, the soul of America. Winning it for the generous among us, not the selfish. Winning it for workers who keep this country going, not just the privileged few at the top. Winning it for those communities who have known the injustice of a knee on the neck. For all the young people who have known only America being rising inequity and shrinking opportunity. They deserve the experience of America's promise. They deserve to experience it in full. You know, no generation ever knows what history will ask of it. All we can ever know is whether we're ready when that moment arrives. And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm. The worst pandemic in over 100 years. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s. And the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change. So the question for us is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be. You know, all elections are important. But we know in our bones this one is more consequential. As many have said, America is at an inflection point. A time of real peril, but also of extraordinary possibilities. We can choose a path of becoming angrier, less hopeful, more divided, a path of shadow and suspicion, or we can choose a different path and together take this chance to heal, to reform, to unite, a path of hope and light. This is a life-changing election. This will determine what America is going to look like for a long, long time. Character is on the ballot. Compassion is on the ballot. Decency, science, democracy, they're all on the ballot. Who we are as a nation, what we stand for, and most importantly, who we want to be. That's all on the ballot. And the choice could not be more clear. No rhetoric is needed. Just judge this president on the facts. 5 million Americans infected by COVID-19. More than 170,000 Americans have died. By far the worst performance of any nation on earth. More than 50 million people have filed for unemployment this year. More than 10 million people are going to lose their health insurance this year. Nearly 1 in 6 small businesses have closed this year. And this president, if he's reelected, you know what will happen. Cases and deaths will remain far too high. More mom and pop businesses will close their doors, and this time for good. Working families will struggle to get by. And yet the wealthiest 1% will get tens of billions of dollars in new tax breaks. And the assault on the Affordable Care Act will continue until it's destroyed, taking insurance away from more than 20 million people, including more than 15 million people on Medicaid, and getting rid of the protections that President Obama worked so hard to get passed for people who have 100 million more people who have pre-existing conditions. And speaking of President Obama, a man I was honored to serve alongside for 8 years as vice president, let me take this moment to say something we don't say nearly enough. Thank you, Mr. President. You were a great president, a president our children could and did look up to. No one's going to say that about the current occupant of the White House. What we know about this president is if he's given 4 more years, he'll be what he's been for the last 4 years. A president who takes no responsibility, refuses to lead, blames others, cozies up to dictators, and fans the flames of hate and division. He'll wake up every day believing the job is all about him, never about you. Is that the American you want for you, your family, your children? I see a different America, one that's generous and strong, selfless and humble. It's an America we can rebuild together. As president, the first step I will take will be to get control of the virus that has ruined so many lives. Because I understand something this president hasn't from the beginning. We will never get our economy back on track. We will never get our kids safely back in schools. We'll never have our lives back until we deal with this virus. The tragedy of where we are today is it didn't have to be this bad. Just look around. It's not this bad in Canada or Europe or Japan or almost anywhere else in the world. And the president keeps telling us the virus is going to disappear. He keeps waiting for a miracle. Well, I have news for him. No miracle is coming. We lead the world in confirmed cases. We lead the world in deaths. Our economy is in tatters with Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American communities bearing the brunt of it. And after all this time, the president still does not have a plan. Well, I do. If I'm your president, on day one, we'll implement the national strategy I've been laying out since March. We'll develop and deploy rapid tests with results available immediately. We'll make the medical supplies and protective equipment that our country needs. And we'll make them here in America, so we will never again be at the mercy of China or other foreign countries in order to protect our own people. We'll make sure our schools have the resources they need to be open, safe, and effective. We'll put politics aside. We'll take the muzzle off our experts so the public gets the information they need and deserve. Honest, unvarnished truth. They can handle it. We'll have a national mandate to wear masks, not as a burden, but as a patriotic duty to protect one another. In short, we'll do what we should have done from the very beginning. Our current president has failed in his most basic duty to the nation. He's failed to protect us. He's failed to protect America. And my fellow Americans, that is unforgivable. As president, I'll make you a promise. I'll protect America. I will defend us from every attack, seen and unseen, always, without exception, every time. Look, I understand. I understand how hard it is to have any hope right now. On this summer night, let me take a moment to speak to those of you who have lost the most. I have some idea how it feels to lose someone you love. I know that deep black hole that opens up in the middle of your chest and you feel like you're being sucked into it. I know how mean and cruel and unfair life can be sometimes. But I've learned two things. First, your loved one may have left this earth, but they'll never leave your heart. They'll always be with you. You'll always hear them. And second, I found the best way through pain and loss and grief is to find purpose. As God's children, each of us have a purpose in our lives. We have a great purpose as a nation to open the doors of opportunity to all Americans, to save our democracy, to be a light to the world once again, and finally to live up to and make real the words written in the sacred documents that founded this nation, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, my dad was an honorable, decent man. He got knocked down a few times pretty hard, but he always got back up. He worked hard, and he built a great middle-class life for our family. He used to say, Joey, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, but I sure in hell expect them to understand them. And then he'd say, Joey, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. I've never forgotten those lessons. That's why my economic plan is all about jobs, dignity, respect, and community. Together we can and will rebuild our economy. And when we do, we'll not only build back, we'll build back better. With modern roads, bridges, highways, broadband, ports and airports as a new foundation for economic growth, with pipes that transport clean water to every community, with 5 million new manufacturing and technology jobs, so the future is made in America. With a healthcare system that lowers premiums, deductibles, drug prices, by building on the Affordable Care Act he's trying to rip away. With an education system that trains our people for the best jobs of the 21st century. There's not a single thing American workers can't do. And where cost doesn't prevent young people from going to college, and student debt doesn't crush them when they get out. With a child care and elder care system that makes it possible for parents to go to work and for the elderly to stay in their homes with dignity. With an immigration system that powers our economy and reflects our values. And with newly empowered labor unions. They're the ones that built the middle class. With equal pay for women, with rising wages you can raise a child on, a family on. And yes, we're going to do more than praise our essential workers. We're finally going to pay them. Pay them. We can and we will deal with climate change. It's not only a crisis, it's an enormous opportunity. An opportunity for America to lead the world in clean energy and create millions of new, good-paying jobs in the process. And we can pay for these investments by ending loopholes, unnecessary loopholes, and the president's $1.3 trillion tax giveaway to the wealthiest 1% and the biggest, most profitable corporations, some of which do not pay any tax at all. Because we don't need a tax code that rewards wealth more than it rewards work. I'm not looking to punish anyone. Far from it. But it's long past time the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations in this country paid their fair share. And for our seniors, Social Security is a sacred obligation, a sacred promise made. They paid for. The current president is threatening to break that promise. He's proposing to eliminate a tax that pays for almost half the Social Security without any way of making up for that lost revenue, resulting in cuts. I will not let that happen. If I'm your president, we're going to protect Social Security and Medicare. You have my word. One of the most powerful voices we hear in the country today is from our young people. They're speaking to the inequity and injustice that has grown up in America. Economic injustice, racial injustice, environmental injustice. I hear their voices. If you listen, you can hear them too. And whether it's the existential threat posed by climate change, the daily fear of being gunned down in school, or the inability to get started in your first job, it will be the work of the next president to restore the promise of America to everyone. And I'm not going to have to do it alone, because I'll have a great vice president at my side. Senator Kamala Harris. She's a powerful voice for this nation. Her story is the American story. She knows about all the obstacles thrown in the way of so many in our country. Women, Black Americans, South Asian Americans, immigrants, the left out and the left behind. But she's overcome every obstacle she's ever faced. No one's been tougher on the big banks and the gun lobby. No one's been tougher in calling out the current administration for its extremism, its failure to follow the law, its failure to simply tell the truth. Kamala and I both draw from our families. That's where we get our strength. For Kamala, it's Doug and their families. For me, it's Jill and ours. I've said many times, no man deserves one great love in his life, let alone two. But I've known two. After losing my first wife in that car accident, Jill came into my life. She put our family back together. She's an educator, a mom, a military mom, and an unstoppable force. If she puts her mind to it, just get out of the way. She's going to get it done. She was a great second lady, and I know she'll make a great first lady for this nation. She loves this country so much. And I'll always have the strength that can only come from family. Hunter, Ashley, all our grandchildren, my brothers, my sister, they give me courage. They lift me up. While he's no longer with us, Bo inspires me every day. Bo served our nation in uniform. A year in Iraq, a decorated Iraqi war veteran. So I take very personally the profound responsibility of serving as Commander-in-Chief. I'll be a president who will stand with our allies and friends and make it clear to our adversaries the days of cozying up to dictators is over. Under President Biden, America will not turn a blind eye to Russian bounties on the heads of American soldiers. Nor will I put up with foreign interference in our most sacred democratic exercise, voting. And I'll always stand for our values of human rights and dignity. I'll work in common purpose for a more secure, peaceful, and prosperous world. History has thrust one more urgent task on us. Will we be the generation that finally wipes out the stain of racism from our national character? I believe we're up to it. I believe we're ready. Just a week ago yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the events in Charlottesville. Close your eyes. Remember what you saw on television. Remember seeing those neo-Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists coming out of fields with lighted torches, veins bulging, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. Remember the violent clash that ensued between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. It was a wake-up call for us as a country, and for me, a call to action. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run, because my father taught us that silence was complicity, and I could never remain silent or complicit. At the time, I said we were in the battle for the soul of this nation, and we are. You know, one of the most important conversations I've had this entire campaign, it was with someone who was much too young to vote. I met with 6-year-old Gianna Floyd the day before her daddy, George Floyd, was laid to rest. She's an incredibly brave little girl. And I'll never forget it. When I leaned down to speak to her, she looked in my eyes and she said, and I quote, "Daddy changed the world. Daddy changed the world." Her words burrowed deep into my heart. Maybe George Floyd's murder was a breaking point. Maybe John Lewis is passing the inspiration. But however it's come to be, however it's happened, America's ready, in John's words, to lay down, quote, the heavy burden of hate at last, and to end the hard work of rooting out our systemic racism. You know, American history tells us that it's been in our darkest moments that we've made our greatest progress, that we found the light. In this dark moment, I believe we're poised to make great progress again, that we can find the light once more. You know, many people have heard me say this, but I've always believed you can define America in one word: possibilities. The defining feature of America: everything is possible. That in America, everyone, and I mean everyone, should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. We can never lose that. In times as challenging as these, I believe there's only one way forward. As a united America, united in our pursuit of a more perfect union, united in our dreams of a better future for us and for our children, united in our determination to make the coming years bright. Are you ready? I believe we are. This is a great nation. We're a good and decent people. For Lord's sake, this is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been able to accomplish when we've done it together. The Irish poet Seamus Heaney once wrote, "History says, don't hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme. This is our moment to make hope and history rhyme. With passion and purpose, let us begin, you and I together, one nation, under God, united in our love for America, united in our love for each other. For love is more powerful than hate, hope is more powerful than fear, and light is more powerful than dark. This is our moment, this is our mission. May history be able to say that the end of this chapter of American darkness began here tonight, as love and hope and light join in the battle for the soul of the nation. And this is a battle we will win, and we'll do it together. I promise you. Thank you, and may God bless you, and may God protect our troops.
Well, there you go. His acceptance speech, Joe Biden, not a very long speech at all.
If they can put that on the box, you can see the virtual crowd is there, and Dr. Biden just came out. What would normally be the balloons falling and all of the things happening. So that is, they're pointing to the virtual people, and they're, as you can see, don't want you to miss any of that. And there's Kamala Harris and her husband. On both sides. And there's the Democratic ticket for this year. Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Kamala Harris. So we're watching there the video wall as they wave to that. And now they're gone. So what'd you think, guys?
Well, I think it's one of the shortest acceptance speeches.
Yeah, they go shorter when there's not an audience to clap between every line.
That's true. And I was thinking of Bill Clinton's. I remember how long that went.
Yeah.
That was a long one when he accepted. There was a lot. I did not hear anything of what he would do specifically. There are some things that were in vague. And he talked about four crises, but I thought before we're going to go back and play that clip about the four crises, but he accused Trump, this is the line, cloaking America in darkness and pledging to be an ally of the light.
There's a lot about hope and light.
Sounds a lot like hope and change, doesn't it?
That was when he was vice president, that's what it was, hope and change. But a lot about hope and light. I thought there was no big gaffes that I recall. I thought he did a good job.
Well, we do know he's been practicing since early afdon.
Yeah, and give him credit. Okay, listen,
he did a good job.
You've heard it in
That's not
the
easy.
news media. It's not easy to do, and he was able to give that speech and do a really nice job of presenting that speech.
Well, let's go back, and I want to look at the four crises, and then we'll, Mike, I'm going to have you speak to that. Let's play that clip about the four crises that he says we're up against.
And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm. The worst pandemic in over 100 years. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s. And the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change.
Climate change?
Yeah.
I did not. That would not have made my top four. All right, so climate change, pandemic. It has been a little hot here in Texas. Anyway, pandemic, the economy, and racial injustice. I mean, that's Mike. What do you think about his four crises that he needs to take care of?
Well, first of all, I think the first two for sure, the pandemic, the economy, the issue that we're dealing with that without question. I mean, this is unheard of in our lifetime, just taking a look at what this country is going through. Now, when it comes to the racial situation, without question, what happened to George Floyd was horrific.
Yes.
No doubt. But we had a president that was African-American, Barack Obama, for 8 years. And you've got to wonder why, if this was such a problem back then as well, why he didn't take it full force and deal with it. So, you hear that there were 8 black men, I believe, killed by unarmed black men killed by police officers over the last year or a couple months or whatever the case may be. And there were 11 white men killed by, unarmed white men killed by police officers as well. So, I think there was a torch that needed to be lit for these people that were hovering just below the surface, many of them in Portland, and they were looking for something to lash out at. And that's what George Floyd, the situation ended up becoming. And in respect to climate change, he threw that in there to make some people happy.
Yeah, Mike, you make a really good point. And Greg, you even alluded to this when we were talking before the speech, the fact that so many of these politicians, including Joe Biden, have been in office 20, 30, 40 years, and they're blaming a guy that's only been in the office for 4 years for all of these things. And they all had chances to make changes. And a lot of the things that he talked about in this speech tonight that we're going to go over, he's had opportunities to change these things while in office, whatever office he held, and he's not done that.
He addressed COVID, saying, with President Trump saying COVID cases and deaths will increase. businesses will remain closed. If he's given 4 more years, he'll be what he's been for the past 4 years. I'm actually for that. The past 4 years has been pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
We've had a great.
I was a
last
little
4 years.
surprised. I really didn't expect him to go after the president really to the level that he did. I know we talked about that in the pre-show there, Mike, but I didn't expect that. I expected the patriotic, which is fine, to wrap himself in the flag and to come up with a slogan. Were you surprised at the comments that he made concerning President Trump?
The answer is yes and no. Yes, because I would hope that a former chief executive would not be making those comments. But I had to say that I kind of expected it, especially with all the Michael Flynn things that have happened, all the things we've learned that happened at the end of the Obama administration going into the Trump administration are absolutely unbelievable. And so you've got to figure that Barack Obama had a hand in some of that. And so clearly he was not a fan of Donald Trump from the beginning, and he's still not.
Well, he's implicated. The vice president is actually implicated in doing wrong with the incoming president. So that'll be an interesting thing in the next 73 days to watch that play out. That's for sure.
Without question. And there was a soundbite that's something that Joe Biden said about what his dad said to him. Silence is complicity. It jumped out at me. Let's listen to it again.
And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. It was a wake-up call for us as a country, and for me, a call to action. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run, because my father taught us that silence was complicity, and I could never remain silent or complicit.
So when I first heard that, my initial thing was that's when you knew you had to run. Are you talking about 1988 or are you talking about now? Well, obviously it's now.
Mike, you had a comment there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the reason that jumped out at me, obviously he was referring to Charlottesville, Virginia 3 years ago. And when the president said what he said, clearly he wasn't referring to the thugs and some of the people that took part in that. But clearly what he was saying is there were some people on both sides that were okay. But what jumped out at me is when Joe Biden said that, complicity, silence is complicity, where was Joe Biden when things were happening, and they're still happening, in Portland, Oregon? Where was Joe Biden when we were hearing what was going on in Chicago, in Seattle, across this nation? Joe Biden was in his basement saying next to nothing when he should have come out and said, stop it. You guys need to stop it right now. So as far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden was silent about that, and that's complicity.
Well, Mike, even the city they're in tonight, Milwaukee, there's a man who's African-American who was executed for being a Trump supporter in Milwaukee, and no one said a single word about it. So there was nothing said. Silence.
And silence says it all. You're right, and it's horrific. But Joe Biden can pull out that point to use it the way he wants to. But I'm going to pull that point out and use it and saying Joe Biden should be a leader in stopping what's going on around this country.
Yeah, amen to that. All right, so Tim, we heard him kind of pull out some leftovers from the Obama campaign. We talked about, and of course Hillary's campaign. He really talked about Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, thank you, John Roberts, for that. There's
Chief Justice.
There's what you say and there's what you do. He said a lot of really good things tonight, things that really made a lot of sense. But here's the thing. He's never done those in office, and the party that he's running for, and we talked about this earlier today, is run by leftists, Greg, and there's a difference between liberal and leftist.
Sure.
We talked about that today, so let's talk a little bit about what the difference is and how all of what he's saying is fine in theory.
When in California, what I learned is the Democrats were not liberals, they were leftists. And a lot of the Republicans actually held liberal positions or moderate positions, if you will. But it's really a religion. A leftist is a socialist, leaning toward communism as well. There were some things he said pinning the coronavirus on President Trump that I thought was very interesting. And Mike, once again, it goes to silence. Where was he when Corona was first coming out? Where was he? Actually, he was against the president. If you guys have a chance, I want to go over the timeline just to remind you of what was happening. Now, how many months ago was it that COVID hit us? What our government was doing. Impeachment was happening during the start of coronavirus. Let me go through the dates with you. You ready? December the 30th, the World Health Organization discovered an unknown virus with pneumonia-like symptoms first observed in the Wuhan province of China. 1 week later, January the 7th, 2020, the coronavirus was first identified. 4 days after that, on January 11th, Chinese state media report the first known death from an illness originating in what they said was the Wuhan market. 4 days after that, January the 15th, 2020, Speaker Nancy Pelosi holds a vote to send articles of impeachment to the Senate. Pelosi and the House Democrats celebrate the solemn occasion with a signing ceremony using commemorative pins. 6 days after that, January the 21st, the first person with coronavirus arrives in the United States from China, where it had been in Wuhan. 2 days later, January 23rd, the House impeachment managers make their opening arguments to remove President Donald J. Trump. January 23rd, China closes off the city of Wuhan completely to slow the spread of the coronavirus to the rest of China. 7 days later, January 30th, 2020, senators begin asking 2 days of questions on both sides for the president's impeachment trial. January the 30th, the World Health Organization declares a global health emergency as coronavirus continues to spread. On the very next day, January 31st, the Senate holds a vote on whether we should have further witnesses for documents of impeachment. On the same day, January 31st, President Trump, listen to this now, January 31st, 2020, President Trump declares a national health emergency. He imposes a ban on travel to and from China. Now listen to this. Former Vice President Joe Biden called President Trump's decision hysterical xenophobia and fear-mongering. And February 2nd, 2 days later, the first death from coronavirus outside of China is reported in the Philippines, and the president orders a temporary travel ban for all non-U.S. citizens who had visited China. After that, more of an impeachment. So that's what was happening when Corona hit. While he's being impeached, the president closes the border, closes flights with China. And Joe Biden is on the record for criticizing that. And then tonight, he gets on there and lays all of this at the feet of the president.
You know, Greg, I think we're going to put that on the America Stands website. It's kind of hard to follow if you're just listening. We'll put that up on the America Stands website, govictory.com/America Stands, and you'll be able to see that timeline. It's very important to see how things happen. I want to play a short clip here because this was my aha moment, and it kind of sent chills down my spine. This is clip number 18, where he's talking about the virus.
And the president keeps telling us the virus is going to disappear. He keeps waiting for a miracle. Well, I have news for him. No miracle is coming.
So I'm telling you right now, I set my faith in agreement with you guys that there is a miracle. It is dead in Jesus' name, and we cast those words down and render them useless.
Absolutely.
Pointless,
you know, Gene,
with no effect.
Later in the speech, near the end, he mentioned us being one nation under God. And I find that so very interesting because his own party platform has no mention of God in it. And we talked about in the Countdown program how his very own party in caucus meetings this week left the words "under God" out of the Pledge of Allegiance. So I don't know how you balance that, but him using that phrase to me was very ironic.
Yeah, amen. It is. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, and before we go off the air, Mike, I want to pitch it over to you. 30 seconds. Last comments.
I agree. Joe Biden, I think, was trying to pull almost a State of the Union, if you will, give a little bit of something to certain groups, but no specifics. You're right. You guys are right. We didn't hear specifics on this. So I think Joe Biden did a good job of reading a teleprompter. Did he say what he's really going to do deep down? No. So that's going to play out. We're going to see I want to see what Joe Biden does in the next 5 days. And does he do a TV interview with a reporter and take all kinds of questions?
Yeah, agreed. I think it'll be very, very interesting. All right, Tim.
Well, again, we're 74 days from the election. There's going to be a lot said in the next 74 days. It's so important that we just keep our eye on the ball. Give a sports analogy. Keep your eye on the ball as to what's important and what we need to pay attention to.
Greg Stevens.
No emotion, just research, do the facts, get it yourself.
Yeah.
And that miracle comment is really big.
Big, yeah.
It's a big,
yeah.
Kind of sent chills.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we know what the truth is, and you know what the truth
That's
is.
Right.
And you're going to continue to get the truth right here on the Victory Channel as we continue to cover this election process. We'll cover the news, and we'll be right here with you every step of the way as we walk forward to the election night, November 3rd. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight.
Next week,
Republican National Convention. We'll cover President Trump's address, and we'll see what God is doing in our nation. So watch the news. Stay with us every day. Join us tomorrow morning for morning prayer right here on the Victory Channel. Get your prayer requests in. We want to help pray with you. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, God loves you. We love you.
And Jesus is Lord.
Lord.